The rider was already deep inside the canyon when he stopped walking. Not because he heard something, because something heard him. The walls rose on either side like ribs of exposed stone, tall and close enough to narrow the sky into a thin blade of pale morning light. The rock held no warmth. It swallowed it. His horse stood several paces behind him, head lowered, reins slack, breathing slow and even. The animal showed no sign of alarm, which made the silence more noticeable, not less. No wind moved through the pass. No insects stirred. Even dust seemed reluctant to settle. Then footsteps sounded behind him. Stone on stone. Measured. Unhurried. His body prepared to turn before his mind finished understanding why. Muscles tightened. Weight shifted forward. His heel lifted slightly from the ground. Before the motion completed, the echo of those footsteps reached him ahead of where his weight had shifted. Too early. The sound arrived ahead of the action, as if it had already been waiting for the movement to begin. He froze. Not stiff with fear. Still in the way a man becomes still when movement feels like a mistake. He did not turn. He did not reach for the reins. He did not call out. Instead, he counted his breath. 1, 2. He stopped at 3. Each breath sounded too loud in his own chest, as if the canyon were listening closely enough to register the smallest internal noise. He became aware of how much sound a body makes simply by existing. Cloth shifting. Leather creaking. Blood moving where it should not be heard. When he finally turned, the space behind him was empty. No rider. No animal. No sound still traveling. The canyon looked exactly as it had moments before. Stone walls. Narrow path. Nothing disturbed. He spoke one word softly, carefully, the way a man speaks when he wants to confirm that his voice still belongs to him. It was not a warning. Not a call. Just a word, chosen without meaning. The canyon answered. With his voice. Not the word he said. A shorter version of it. Clipped. Incomplete. As if the rest had been unnecessary. The sound came from behind him, then from the side, then nowhere he could point to with certainty. Then silence followed. Not the absence of sound. The sense that something had finished listening. Earlier that morning, the canyon had seemed ordinary. Avoided, yes, but ordinary. It sat between two longer routes that most men preferred, not because it was dangerous, but because it was inconvenient. Wagons passed wide of it when they could. Riders cut through only when time mattered. Old men did not camp near it, though none of them could ever explain why in words that held up under questioning. They simply chose other ground when night came. Animals behaved the same way. Deer crossed the mouth of the canyon without hesitation but never followed the stream that ran through its center. Birds nested along the higher ledges but did not settle lower, where the walls pressed close enough to narrow the air. None of this had concerned him. Places accumulated habits once enough people passed through them. Avoidance was not fear. It was efficiency. Men learned which ground offered comfort and which offered none, and stories formed later, when memory tried to justify preference. The canyon itself was narrow but passable. A known shortcut. Not favored, but mapped. Its length was recorded. Its slope measured well enough for wagons to pass in dry seasons. He had traced the route with his finger the night before, noting nothing unusual beyond tight turns and poor light. Near the entrance, a weathered trail marker lay snapped in half. The break looked recent. The wood had not darkened yet. Pale splinters showed where the grain had torn. The marker rested where it had fallen, not dragged, not disturbed. There were no tracks around it. No boot prints. No hooves. No sign that anything heavy had struck it. He paused longer than necessary. Not in alarm. In habit. He nudged the marker once with his boot, turning it over. The soil beneath was smooth, packed hard, untouched. Then he rode on. Nothing supernatural. Just a detail that refused to explain itself. Inside the canyon, sound behaved the way sound should. At first, the horse's hooves struck stone and returned cleanly, each impact answered once before thinning into the walls. The echoes arrived with proper distance, proper delay. Nothing overlapped. Nothing lingered longer than it should have. The canyon gave back exactly what it was given, no more and no less. He paid attention without forcing it. That had always been the trick. He let the rhythm of travel settle in hoof, stone, breath, leather. The narrowness of the pass exaggerated the noise, but not unnaturally. Tight places always did. Sound had fewer directions to escape, fewer angles to dissipate. Men mistook that for threat when it was simply physics. He stopped and tested it deliberately. Clapped once. One echo answered. Sharp. Accurate. He waited. The sound dissolved completely, leaving the canyon empty again. He nodded to himself, almost amused. The earlier incident, whatever it had been, felt smaller now. A timing error. A lapse in attention. The kind of thing that happened when a man entered unfamiliar terrain already thinking about other measures. Geology explained most things if you let it. Stone density varied. Moisture trapped in seams bent sound. Wind moved in ways the eye could not follow. Even temperature affected how noise carried. The canyon had all the ingredients required to behave strangely without meaning anything by it. He spoke again, louder this time, shaping the word carefully, listening for distortion. The canyon returned his voice properly. Complete. Unaltered. No clipping. No delay. He walked deeper. For several minutes, everything behaved. The path curved where the map said it would. The slope rose and fell gently, exactly as expected. Light thinned but did not disappear. Sound continued to follow rules he recognized. The canyon did nothing unusual. That was the trick. The mind relaxes fastest when danger pretends not to exist. Confidence returned quietly, without ceremony. He adjusted his pace, lengthened his stride, let his attention drift outward instead of down at his feet. He focused on the higher walls, the pale seam of sky above, the way shadows gathered where the rock folded inward. He told himself the anomaly had been coincidence. A misalignment of sound and movement. A momentary error in perception. The canyon was only stone. And stone, no matter how narrow or old, always obeyed rules. The change announced itself quietly. A small stone shifted under his boot and slid down the path, bouncing once before disappearing into a shallow crease in the rock. One echo returned. Then a second. Then nothing. He waited. Not because he expected something to happen, but because waiting was part of measurement. Sound, when honest, revealed itself fully if given time. He counted the space between the echoes in his head, comparing it to distance and slope. It did not settle. He bent and picked up another stone, similar in size, similar weight. He tossed it farther, harder, giving it reason to behave predictably. The echo came back clean. One return. Proper delay. Encouraged, he threw a third stone immediately after. The echo lagged. Not in the way sound lagged when it traveled farther. In the way a thought lagged when it arrived late. He frowned, not with fear, but with the irritation of a man whose instruments were lying to him. He stepped a pace to the right and tried again. This time the echo came back thinner, closer than it should have been. He adjusted his position again, changed the angle of the throw, altered the force. The canyon answered each time. But never the same way twice. Some echoes arrived full and clear. Others returned clipped, as if the sound had been cut short mid-travel. A few seemed to come from places the stone could not have reached, angles that contradicted the walls he could see. He clapped once. 2 responses answered. Not overlapping. Not identical. The first arrived with proper delay. The second followed too soon, as if it had been waiting just behind the sound itself. He did not clap again. Repetition taught patterns, and patterns were invitations. Instead, he stood still and listened. The canyon felt different now, not louder, not closer, but occupied. As though the space around him had begun to hold rules that shifted under inspection. Each sound felt less like a reflection and more like a choice being made somewhere out of sight. He tested silence. Nothing happened. He shifted his weight slightly. A faint sound answered, out of sequence. He exhaled slowly, careful not to let his breath become another experiment. This was no longer random behavior. Randomness averaged out. It returned to baseline if given enough attempts. This did not. The canyon was no longer behaving incorrectly. It was behaving inconsistently. An inconsistency, when sustained, was its own kind of order. He slowed his pace. Not because he felt threatened. Because he felt challenged. Every strange place he had ever crossed had demanded the same response: patience first, interpretation second. Panic ruined measurement. Curiosity sharpened it. He had learned that lesson early, watching men mistake uncertainty for danger and danger for intent. The canyon had not acted with intent. Not yet. It had produced inconsistent results, yes, but inconsistency was not intelligence. Landslides behaved unpredictably. Wind sheared sound in ways no map could anticipate. Caverns bent echoes until even familiar noises felt foreign. He had solved problems like this before. The mistake, he reminded himself, was assuming the land cared whether it was understood. The land did not care. It simply existed, obeying forces that did not announce themselves. Men imposed meaning afterward, when confusion needed a shape. He adjusted his attention deliberately. Stopped trying to measure every sound. Stopped turning each anomaly into a question that demanded an answer. Instead, he widened his focus, took in the canyon as a whole. The walls. The light. The narrow strip of sky. He let sound arrive without reaching for it. The effect was immediate. The canyon settled. Hoofbeats returned cleanly again. Echoes behaved, arriving once, dissolving properly. The strange doubling faded into the background, as though it had never been there at all. Relief followed, quiet but persuasive. He had found the rhythm. That realization felt earned, not hopeful. It aligned with experience. You adapted, and the land responded. That was how it had always worked. You did not fight terrain. You learned its tolerances and moved within them. He continued forward with renewed confidence. Not reckless. Measured. Each step reinforced the sense that the canyon preferred this approach: attention without interrogation, presence without insistence. The path felt more stable beneath his boots. The air seemed less dense. Even the silence felt cooperative now. He told himself the anomaly had never been the canyon. It had been his approach. And approaches could be corrected. He moved forward again, keeping the rhythm he had settled into. For a while, nothing resisted him. Then he took 5 steps. The echo of the 4th arrived before the 5th landed. He stopped. Not abruptly, carefully, as if stopping too quickly might register as another test. He stood still and listened to the space around him, waiting for the canyon to correct itself. It didn't. He counted his breath. 1, 2. The sound of his boots shifting against the stone reached his ears before his weight finished settling. A faint scrape. Anticipatory. He frowned, not with alarm, but with a precise kind of confusion. Sound could behave strangely in tight places, but time did not. Time obeyed sequence. Cause, then effect. Always. He stepped sideways. The sound stepped sideways first. Not louder. Not closer. Earlier. He checked the light without meaning to. The strip of sky above the canyon looked unchanged. The sun's position suggested only a short while had passed since he entered. His body agreed, no stiffness, no hunger, no fatigue worth noting. His mind disagreed. Something in him insisted that more time had elapsed than his senses could confirm. Not hours. Not days. Just enough to matter. He waited again, holding perfectly still. Nothing happened. The canyon did not rush to fill the silence. It held it, as if silence itself were another variable being adjusted. He became aware of how uncertain his internal measures felt, how easily his sense of duration slipped once he stopped trusting sound to mark it. He realized then that the problem was no longer noise. It was sequence. Events were no longer arriving in the order he expected them to. Effects no longer waited patiently behind causes. The canyon had begun to rearrange something more fundamental than echo. He did not try to explain it. Explanation required stable reference points, and those were beginning to thin. He said nothing after that. Silence felt safer now, not as a solution, but as a pause. A way to stop feeding the canyon variables it seemed eager to rearrange. He kept his mouth closed, his breathing shallow, his movements slow enough to feel deliberate. For a moment, it worked. The canyon remained quiet. No echoes arrived early. No sounds drifted out of place. The wall stood still, indifferent again, as though whatever disturbance had passed. Then a sound came from behind him. Not an echo. Not a response. Initiation. Stone settling lightly against stone, the way it might after a distant shift, except there had been no movement. No step. No thrown rock. Nothing that should have caused it. He turned his head slightly, careful not to move his feet. The sound came again. From a different place. Closer. He realized then that silence was no longer neutral. It was not the absence of action. It was a condition the canyon could override at will. The place did not wait for sound to be given to it anymore. It generated its own. He tested something else instead. Attention. Without moving his body, he focused his awareness to the left on a dark seam in the rock where shadow gathered more deeply. He did not look directly. He only noticed it. A faint sound answered from that direction. He shifted his attention again, toward the narrow strip of sky above. The sound followed. Not delayed. Not reflected. Aligned. Understanding settled slowly, heavy and unavoidable. The canyon was not reacting to sound. It was tracking attention. Every movement, every thought that reached outward, registered. The place did not care whether the attention arrived through voice, motion, or silence. It responded to the act of noticing itself. He felt the rules tighten around him, not violently, but with precision. This was no longer a problem of acoustics. It was a problem of being observed by the land he was trying to observe. He stood still for a long time. Long enough for discomfort to arrive, not fear, but the dull ache of restraint. Muscles wanted to shift. Breath wanted to deepen. The instinct to test the canyon again pressed against his patience, urging him to confirm what he already suspected. He resisted it. Movement felt like a question now. Sound felt like an offering. Silence, at least, did not seem to provoke immediate response. The canyon held itself in balance around him. No echoes returned. No stone settled. The narrow strip of sky above remained unchanged, pale and indifferent. For a brief moment, it almost felt as though the place had forgotten him. Then a sound came from deeper inside the canyon. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. They did not echo the way his had. They did not arrive late or early. They arrived with the wrong certainty, as if the space had prepared itself for them. He did not move. The footsteps continued anyway, each one aligning with the pace of his breathing. When his breath slowed, they slowed. When it caught slightly in his chest, the rhythm shifted with it. He became acutely aware of how exposed stillness made him feel. Without movement, without sound, there was nothing to disguise his presence. The canyon did not need him to act anymore. It already had enough information. The silence stretched again, thinner now, as though held under tension. He felt the urge to turn toward the exit, to confirm it was still there, press at the edges of his awareness. He did not. He knew that whatever waited behind him would not require his attention to remain where it was. Footsteps sounded again. Deeper inside the canyon. They did not rush. They did not hesitate. Each step landed with the same measured certainty, stone meeting stone as though the ground had already agreed to receive them. He did not move. The sound moved anyway. It shifted position before his weight changed, as if the canyon no longer waited for confirmation. The rhythm adjusted first. The echo, if it could still be called that, arrived ahead of the action. He turned his head toward the mouth of the canyon. The bend behind him, the one he had passed only minutes ago, was no longer there. Not hidden. Not obscured by shadow. Gone. The stone rose smoothly where the exit should have been, unmarked and unfamiliar, as though the canyon had never opened in that direction at all. The footsteps continued, closer now, matching his breathing exactly. Understanding arrived without panic. Whatever was walking there didn't need to follow him anymore. It already knew where he was.